Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samiotti. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and everybody. Silence. Stop talking. Pencils down. Put that coffee pot down. It is time for our weekly joint live stream. So this is the most important event of the week, and so welcome, Peter. How are you? I heard
Um,
you. Somebody told me that you were very happy that Barry Weiss has been appointed editor in chief of CBS News. Is this true?
oh, they lie.
They
Okay.
lied.
No, I'm not surprised by it, but I'm not as worked up about it as others. I mean, CBS News is not the be end and be all of news today. It has a very small outreach now. Its programming we'll see, but there's so much on alternative media has just overtaken them. It's really kind of blasé in many ways. And because there's a heightened awareness who's running CBS News. I mean, before that, how many people knew who was running CBS News?
I don't think
Industry
anybody knew. I mean, I don't know
industry people
whom did
know.
she replace. I don't know whom
Yeah,
she
yeah. I
replaced.
mean, industry people know who's running CNN and
Right.
Fox and all that. But now people are going to say, "Oh, okay, we know the score there." Now, if it starts, like changing the algorithm, as people say, they start changing their news, which is statist. Okay, I mean, supports the State Department in foreign policy. It's not a outlier or anything. This is really mainstream, and mainstream media. Its day has come. Okay, now there'll still be some advertising and all that, but. George, when's the last time you said, "Wow, CBS News broke this story"? I mean, I don't remember the last time that happened. Okay, or
No,
maybe
that
scandal when someone is fired because they said the truth about something.
right. No, that's very true. Um, they do have the prestige. In other words, they do have
With boomer,
where
with boomer.
people, yeah, anybody who's sort of an important person around the world, president or whatever. Oh, I better go on CBS or I better go on NBC. I
I
mean,
don't think that's true
whenever
anymore.
whenever we show little clips from NBC News, it just shows, well, we've got this and this president or this and this prime minister or whatever. So they do have that. They have the cachet. They don't necessarily have the viewership numbers, but they still are trading on their reputation. That doesn't mean that it's going to go on forever. They're going to be able to trade on their reputation. But at the moment, they still have, oh, CBS News. Isn't that where Walter Cronkite used to work? Yeah, that will,
Yeah, used to. Everything is used to.
yeah,
Okay, and
yeah.
maybe it's something to compare to moving forward. But it's cachet today. Huh, eh, that's my attitude. Okay, I just think with Barry Weiss being given that position, I just think it's a sad comment on our times because she has her views and she has a right to her views. Okay, but I mean, here's a person that is known for very she's a hardcore Zionist. Okay, that's what she traffics in, and she's been successful in that.
Mhm.
Okay, I adamantly, vigorously disagree with her approach, but it served her well. But this is what CBS News wants? Okay, where we have a rabid Zionist running our news division. Is that a good calling card for CBS, where Walter Cronkite used to work?
But it's a very interesting issue because, of course, you know, we know about Barry Weiss and how she launched her career. I remember, I mean, she launched her career by sniffing out pro Palestinian professors at Columbia University. I mean, that's what elevated her. She was trying to get pro Palestinian university professors fired at Columbia. And then she parlayed that into a position at the Wall Street Journal. She parlayed that into a position at the New York Times. Then she started her own thing, and now I don't know, 150 million that she got from Paramount for this ridiculous free press.
Law,
So
law.
yeah, so that's it. Now, it, the remarkable thing is, in a way, is just how much the news media has have evolved over the years into becoming as pro-Israeli as they are. I mean, if you look at the old coverage, let's say 1982, we don't have to go back all that far. 1982, at the time of the invasion of Lebanon, the voices were very critical. The media were very critical of what Israel was doing in Lebanon. You wouldn't get anything like that. You wouldn't get that kind of coverage now. So Barry Weiss is, I think, qualitatively a little different from whoever was her the predecessor, but it is a reflection of just how much the mainstream media have moved toward essentially a fervently pro-Israel position.
Yeah, and this is in the backdrop of that. You just I haven't come across a single public opinion poll which says support with Israel is solid or in gaining. No, across the board.
Right.
Okay. Again, what is the media savvy here in appointing someone to run your news organization when the country that you will cover in a obviously in a positive way is seen quite negatively across virtually every single demographic in the country. I mean,
Right.
what kind of smarts is that? I don't get it. And this applies also to TikTok. You need to have what is it, algorithm hygiene or something like that. Well, what was it about the algorithm that made TikTok so popular, and you're going to fiddle with it now?
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
I don't know. I mean, this corner burger store makes the best burger in the world. I'm going to buy it and I'm going to change the recipe. Hello, and I don't get. I don't think it's going to work. I just don't. And
Mhm.
this old mainstream legacy media environment's in a state of collapse. I read a report just a couple of days ago. I mean, look at Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood. This is a free fall. Okay, the technology exists for people, for creators. Now you can control the platforms and the domains and all that. I don't know. They think they've built a better mousetrap. I just don't think so. Will it? But it will certainly alienate a lot of people. It will alienate an enormous amount of people. Where it'll at least allow a debate. I mean,
Mhm.
okay, you have your position. Again, I'm not going to shift from that. Barry
Mhm.
Weiss has a right to her opinions, not to her facts, but to her opinions. Okay, I just don't see how that's a good sell for a mainstream media platform
Yeah.
today. I just don't.
Right. Right. So changing gears. Um,
Just a blanket. Thank you. I love the sweater too, everyone. Okay.
it's funny. I didn't even notice it until I saw some of the people putting the messages about how they're commenting on the sweater. So now I see it.
Here we go. Let's give the little guy complete justice here. There you go.
It's very cute. It is definitely very cute. Um, but so Angela Merkel, former Chancellor of Germany, was in Hungary a few days ago promoting the Hungarian edition of her memoirs. Um, and
Bestseller? A
oh,
bestseller,
yeah, it's a
George?
bestseller. The people, it's going like hotcakes. People just got, they're fighting to get their hands on this book.
Hungarian,
And
right? It's been
yes,
translated.
yes, translated into Hungarian. And of course, while she was in Hungary, she met Viktor Orban, who was extolling her as a, in Orban's view, anyone who was somehow in the past is, ipso facto superior to anyone who's around now. So he's always does
Maybe
this.
not a bad rule of thumb. I don't know.
He's all right, Mitterrand, fantastic. Helmut Kohl, absolutely brilliant. So now Angela Merkel, he didn't have particularly great relations with Angela Merkel, but now great, super. But anyway, what she sat down for an interview, and Angela Merkel, she's feels that she's been unfairly attacked. She gets attacked all the time for being very pro-Russian. She wasn't particularly pro-Russian, but
No,
now
she
she's
was.
being pro-Russian, and she's trying to defend herself. And she's always laying the blame on somebody or other. So we know about how she said, "Oh well, I had this plan. It was everything was worked through. I was supported Minsk because that would give Ukraine time to rearm and prepare." So she thought that would be
Well,
that's
that's after the fact
yeah. She
story.
said that exactly. That she only said that
After.
whenever, I think, 2022, whenever she gave those interviews. I think when her book came out in German. Um, But now she's come up with an interesting variant on the story, was that it's all the fault of Poland and the Baltic states. That she had this plan to negotiate with Putin. That before the start of the so-called SMO, she had this plan to negotiate with Putin, and it didn't work out because she was thwarted by Poland and the Baltic states. So let me just show you.
Well,
Just
I
a,
mean, during the entire history of her very long chancellorship, Poland and the Baltic states didn't thwart her. Okay, and
I
we
don't
had a
think so. It
don't have
didn't.
a case of that. No, my gripe is that when after the coup in February of 2024, she walked away from the European agreement that had been
20,
only signed
20,
the day
2014.
she walked away from her own work. So she's let's what's the word? A liar.
Yes. So here's this her interview, and you can see this is ex-German Chancellor Merkel blames Poland and Baltic states for war in Ukraine. The former chancellor said, already in June 2021, I felt the Russian President Vladimir Putin was no longer taking the Minsk agreement seriously,
Oh God.
and that is why I wanted a new format. But remember, she in those interviews with Die Zeit, she was basically saying that she wasn't taking the agreement seriously. So now apparently she was taking it seriously, and it was Putin who wasn't taking it seriously. Back then, we could talk to Putin directly as the EU, claimed Merkel, before pointing the finger of blame at Poland and the Baltic states. And she told Partisan, this is the Hungarian media outlet, that she believes the refusal by Poland and the Baltic states to pursue such a format encouraged Putin to take the path of full on aggression. Some at the European Council did not support that. They were also primarily the Baltic states, but Poland was also against it because they feared that we would not have a common policy towards Russia. And then she goes on. Merkel added that since there was no desire to reach such a common policy within the bloc, her proposal had to be dropped, and no more direct EU Russian talks were possible. Her remarks were slammed by Poland's conservatives, opposition who were in government in 2021. Former Prime Minister Morawiecki posted on social media, Angela Merkel has confirmed that she was one of the most damaging German politicians in Europe. And head of the PIS parliamentary caucus demanded that Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk denounce his former ally, calling Merkel one of the funders of the Putin regime for her role in promoting trade with Russia. And then the MEP paraphrased former French President Jacques Chirac's words about how Central Europe had missed the opportunity to keep quiet about the war in Iraq. Merkel lost the opportunity to stay silent. If it had not been for her support for the Nord Stream gas pipeline, Putin would not have had the funds to start the war. She has blood on her hands. Um, so,
What is the whole point of this ridiculous blame game? Again, it's so petty. I don't know. I'm just going to kind of put a big cross this off. what was Washington's policy? Okay, that's
Yes.
what counts the
Right.
most here. What was the
Right.
Biden people saying? Okay,
Right.
and what they were saying always crowds out everyone else. What the German chancellor or the Lithuanian prime minister have to say, that's just kind of small potatoes, everybody. They're not the
Right.
decision makers. The Biden people had made it clear that we're going on this path because all you have to do is kick in the door and the roof is going to fall in. So who gives a you know what about Angela Merkel and her evolving story?
I agree with you. The funny thing is that she has this ridiculous reputation for being very wise, and oh, she's so much wiser than the Americans. But that's a kind
That's
of a
it's
low
empirically not
compliment.
true. What she
It is
failed
very, yeah. You
what
go.
she had the remarkable ability and the longevity of it, it is really quite extraordinary, of not making decisions. She
Well, no,
kicked
no,
the
I think,
can
yeah,
down
I
the
think
road with some notable exceptions. 2015 opened the gates to illegal immigration, okay,
yes,
which
yeah.
eventually translated into Brexit. Good job,
That's
Frau.
exactly. But interestingly, I mean, if after 2015, she survived for another 6 years. So it was a, she didn't
Well, that's
damage her
something
too much.
with German politics.
No,
Okay,
I agree.
so it
Now
certainly
the
had nothing to do with her charisma.
no, definitely not. Now what I was referring to when I said that she has this reputation is that people talk about, oh, in 2008 she quashed the Bush Cheney proposal to induct Ukraine into NATO, and so the people
That's
that
not true either.
responsible statecraft say, "Oh well, she was she very wise. She put her foot down and rejected Bush and Cheney, but she didn't put her foot down. She didn't do it. She just simply said, okay, well, let's do it a little more slowly. So basically got the
Eventually,
worst of
no,
all worlds.
let's remember the communique that Georgia and Ukraine would eventually
Yep,
become was
that's right.
NATO policy. So the Frau is lying again,
Right.
and her supporters have no idea what they're talking about because
No, no, but that yeah, but they want to.
she failed there again.
Yes, but that's the thing that her supporters, this is the kind of the responsible statecraft people. They always want to somehow pinpoint to that there is some wise group of European leaders who are trying to thwart the
How
aggressiveness and
long do we have to go
of
back?
the Americans.
How long do we have to go back to find a wise European leader?
I think we have to go back a long way. And it is true that she didn't go along with. I mean, what Bush wanted there and then was to put Ukraine right, into the membership action plan. I mean, that was the Bush administration proposal. Yes, she and I think Sarkozy said no to that, but by putting that into that Bucharest communique, then that's it. NATO was indeed committed to inducting Ukraine and Georgia eventually. And every single NATO communique ever since then, which 2008, every single one repeated the same thing. So it was there. It became NATO policy that Ukraine and Georgia would be members.
More recently, if it has not been overtly mentioned, individual member countries of NATO have repeated it to this day. To
Right.
this,
To this day. And now, in the meantime, we've often complained that, oh, we don't have Stoltenberg to kick around anymore. But fortunately, today we do have Stoltenberg to kick around because he has come out with his memoirs. And while his memoirs are not yet publicly available, The Guardian has published excerpts from Stoltenberg's memoirs. And he is every bit as small-minded and as foolish as we had been led to believe. But the interesting aspect of it is his quite vivid descriptions of his interactions with Trump, which were not particularly um, friendly, shall we say. And here's this Stoltenberg recalls the roller coaster ride of dealing with Donald Trump, how close the US president brought the alliance to the point of collapse. And then here, you notice how
This is the walkout, right?
that was in 2018. Yeah, will never happen. I mean, Trump didn't see it through. It says here, for the first 6 months of 2016, Hillary Clinton was ahead in every poll. By autumn, election experts were predicting her victory. I too had the gut feeling this would be the outcome. On election night, my wife and I arranged a party with friends and colleagues at the residence in Brussels. So he has a party essentially to celebrate Hillary Clinton's victory. We rigged up a large television in the living room, and hamburgers were served. A
In
long day
Brussels.
later,
In Brussels.
yeah, hamburgers, yeah, and have the mayo and the mustard on hand. Um, and then I woke up at 5, checked my phone. Donald Trump had taken Pennsylvania and Ohio. It still wasn't 100% certain, but CNN had reported he was going to win. So this caused a great deal of anxiety in NATO headquarters. And it says I was anxious about what would happen next, because all the things that Trump had said. NATO is obsolete. Um, a view that undermined American foreign policy over the past 70 years. And then and then he goes on, but I wanted NATO to establish a good working relationship with him as quickly as possible in order to get him and his administration to take a more positive view of the alliance. Within NATO, self discipline would be necessary. I made it clear exasperated groaning at the internal meetings was unacceptable. Right. So everyone has to behave himself. There would be no eye rolling at Trump's tweets or public appearances, no mocking laughter over videos, no jokes about golfing or his mannerisms.
I
Zero.
thought this was an alliance of equals.
It was,
So
but no, it's very funny that I mean Stoltenberg kind of puts all of this in, and then you think to yourself, okay, that sort of reflects his own view of of basically of Trump. Trump has said also, has always been saying all sorts of nice things about Stoltenberg, but he puts all this no eye rolling, no mocking laughter, no jokes about golfing. In other words, these are all things that he Stoltenberg wanted to do. Um, and then he has this first telephone conversation with him, and then everything was going
are you
well.
reading? Are you reading from a slide?
Oh, you can't see it?
No, no.
Oh, okay. That is my fault. Thank you. Good that you. Yes. Let me bring this up.
We go. Okay. I mean, George has an amazing memory, but not this good of a
Even
memory.
that, even that great. No, no, that's not quite that. No,
Yeah.
that's yes.
Unless
Um,
unless I'm talking to an AI version of George. Okay.
that's right. So yeah, so here we are, and he says this is his first telephone conversation with Trump, and he says soon our conversation returned to Russia, and I repeated the points I had been keen to make since taking office in NATO. We must be strong and predictable, but be open to maintaining a dialogue with Russia. Russia is here to stay. It's a neighboring country, not a terrorist organization that needs to be eradicated. Um, then, as I had done in many other conversations, I referenced Norway's experiences. Mr. President, as former Prime Minister of Norway, I know that it's possible to speak with the Russians. Trump cast a questioning look. Are you Norwegian? I understood why he was asking. Over the years, I've received many heads of organizations myself, and it isn't always easy to remember where each comes from. I smiled. Yes, I'm Norwegian. But of course, the reason that all these people are interchangeable, there's no particular reason why you would think Stoltenberg was Norwegian rather than Dutch or Danish or whatever. I mean, if you didn't know, you might think Mark Rutte was Norwegian. or what was it? What was it? Rasmussen was Norwegian. I mean, these are all ubiquitous,
Yeah, they all
interchangeable
speak
characters.
they all speak English the same
They
way.
all exactly. They all speak English the same. Um, um, and
And
then
and
yeah,
and for some reason, I think it's part of the um, uh, recruiting process. You have you can get the job if you have no sense of humor because none of them ever have a sense of
no,
humor.
no, no, no.
Or they when they make a joke, they're the only one that laughs at it. Okay.
Yes, yes. But the job of a NATO Secretary General, it's even clear just from this excerpt published in The Guardian, is keep America sweet. They have no other ideas about anything. They have anything at all other than we have to suck up to the President of the United States. And so Stoltenberg was clearly trying to figure out, well, Trump is we didn't want Trump, now we've got Trump, but we've got to figure out how to work with him. How do we to get around him? It took him a little bit of time to get on Trump's wavelength. Mark Rutte already knew because he'd had the experience of Stoltenberg. So Rutte right away started talking Trump's language. All about daddy and so on. That's obviously very pleasing to Trump. And so Trump there was this Article 5, and it said, why should we protect countries that aren't willing to pay for their own security? And it says, after exchanging a few pleasantries, the plan was to take Trump to a place where the text of Article 5 is carved into the wall. So photographs of the two of us could be taken in front of it. That's clever. Notice how subtle this is. I had intended to offer Trump a few facts about the new building and NATO, but his constant questions kept cutting me off. Do you really need such a big headquarters? He asked. What do you need all these people for? Um, and then says, I replied that while the organization itself isn't that large, member states' delegations also use the building to make it easy to meet with security measures in place, and everyone uses the same cafeteria. I told Trump who had designed the headquarters, the names of this architect, who also designed Trump International Hotels and Tower in Chicago. And then Trump says, I know those people. They're extremely expensive. I don't understand why you choose those expensive architects. Extremely expensive. This was you remember that was the meeting. That's when he sort of picked up the president of Montenegro and got him out of the way. So this was his first meeting. And he clearly was a real major preoccupation of Trump's the expense of this building. I mean, he's always he does this. He did that when he went to the Fed recently, and he started berating uh, Jerome Powell about the cost of all these refurbishment. And you say, I could have got this done for you, at a quarter of the price. Um, but then they had this. Um, yeah, they had this the big meeting in 2018, and then clearly Trump was then started berating them about the United States spends 4% and so on. If the United States withdrew, the alliance would be dead. Trump had made me responsible for its possible dissolution. He wanted me to set things straight before the summit, and the summit was 12 days away. And then says the U.S. doesn't need NATO. Why should I continue to pay for this organization when I don't need it? There was silence around the table. Trump continued to talk at length about the trade imbalance with the EU. In other hobby horse, the EU sent its BMWs and Mercedes into the United States, almost tariff free. Can't go on like this. He won't go on like this. But eventually they got around him, um, and um, and then says that he says, then finally it came the moment I had feared since our conversation 12 days earlier, when Trump had said the United States would only continue to be a member of NATO if Germany and the United States paid the same. I'm leaving this meeting. There's no reason for me to be here anymore. And now, and so now everything's falling apart, and so on. I looked around the room. All the leaders wore grave expressions. Everyone understood things were on the brink of collapse. The entire summit, all the declarations of the agreement, and then, but finally, with Merkel, they got around him, and then finally, I have to. This is Merkel says. I have to say that I don't feel I'm being treated fairly here. This Angela Merkel said. You speak frankly, Donald. So I will do the same. Germany is the second largest contributor of forces to NATO. 9/11 and Afghanistan are the only time Article 5 had ever been invoked. This has contributed to protecting the United States, and so on. And so eventually they patched things up. But the reason why it's worth looking at this is that this was an opportunity for everybody basically to dissolve NATO. Trump had made very reasonable points. What the hell we Americans are getting out of this? We don't need this. NATO's not defending us, and we're contributing a hell of a lot more than you are. And for those Europeans who say, "Well, we got to look after our own security, autonomy, strategic autonomy," when this could have been an opportunity. Okay, yeah, great. Then this could be a parting of the ways. History would have been very different, but instead they kind of they all pleaded with him. Oh yeah, yeah, we promise, we absolutely we're going to spend.
Also, also, Trump asked a very fair question. What do you need all these people for? What
Oh
do
yeah,
you need this headquarters for?
yes,
Okay, because what it is that it's bureaucracies looking for reasons to
yeah,
exist. Okay,
that's right,
and,
that's right.
and decrease their budgets and all that. I mean, the last time I checked, and this was before this special military operation, is that they had 5,000 full-time employees at their quarters,
Yeah, yeah,
and I'm sure it's increased. I mean, this is the nature of bureaucracy. And also, everyone, George and I have touched upon this over and over again. NATO is the conduit for America to express its
right.
desires and demands. It's not the
Yeah,
EU, it's
that's
NATO.
right. That's
That's
right.
the way, and that's how they have the entire cadre policy, how they move people around. Okay, I mean, it is the liberal West nomenclatura, the same thing that ran the
Right.
Soviet.
No, absolutely.
Exactly
That's
the same.
yeah, I agree, and that's the interesting thing is that because ultimately there really isn't a great desire on either side to dissolve NATO. I mean, Americans do indeed complain, and this is a long-standing complaint. Hey, we're spending a hell of a lot more than you are. You need to cough up more. Every president has done this, um, and then even threatening. Well, maybe we're going to walk. It isn't. It doesn't happen
Okay,
precisely
look.
for the reasons
Remember
we just said, because
who's
this is the way we express our dominance
exactly.
of the world. This is the Western Hemisphere. All of it is under our tutelage. If you left NATO, let's say you will be much diminished as a great power. So that's why they do it. This is how America dominates the European continent. That's why they
Well,
have no intention of
who's the guy that represents the U.S. now? This Whitaker guy, right?
Whittaker, Matt Whittaker, yeah.
Well, what does
Yeah.
he know about foreign policy?
Nothing. He's just
No,
he's some.
but what's important is, oh, that's a nice little resume line. Head of NATO,
That's right. That's right.
ambassador to NATO.
Exactly. That's right. Exactly. That's right. And so, but this is the regular thing. All the way back to John Foster Dulles and the agonizing reappraisal. The Americans have no intention of withdrawing from the European continent. It's true that they want them to spend a lot more, so that the American can also focus on other parts of the world. That doesn't mean they have any intention of walking. And
How, how often, everyone, does a major bureaucracy wake up? Its leadership. We're not. We're useless. We're gonna fold the whole operation in. Turn out the lights. No, it never happens. I don't
no,
care under what political system, in what century. It never ever happens. It's a
no,
grift,
yeah,
and And the U.S. stays in NATO because they want they want the European countries, relatively rich countries still in the world, to buy American arms.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
That's right. Yeah,
I mean,
and
and
but
that's one of
also
the reasons why the
you know,
U.S. stays in is it's a marketplace.
that's right. But it's also a way of
And they're not very subtle on
right,
pushing
right.
down.
But,
Like
but
when
it's
you
more
go
than
and
that.
buy
I mean, it's
something on the
yeah,
internet, is
but but it's
America
more than just but
friend.
it's more than just arms. I mean, it's
No, no,
dominating the
that's
European continent.
it's very
But
important.
it's
Among
it
many
is important,
things.
but it's more than arms. I mean, they dominate the European
Yeah, I'm
continent.
agreeing with you,
Yeah,
George.
oh, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
agreeing.
And
Okay.
a way of projecting power
Yes.
elsewhere. Yeah, that's right. So that's why they're not. Um, and it's American preoccupation to push the last remnants of any Russian influence in Europe out once and for all. Hence,
Okay. Another example. NATO, because I visited it myself in Kabul, NATO headquarters, massive. Bagram, massive, massive base. Okay. Why? Why was NATO? The Americans wanted NATO to be there to legitimize their illegal wars.
right,
Okay,
right,
it's the coalition of the willing. It's always spreading out. Okay,
yeah,
that's another key thing that NATO plays. Okay,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh,
That's it.
they
That's
may
it.
they may not effective military force, let's say in Iraq or in Afghanistan, but the flag is there. That's very important for an
That's it.
American.
It's exactly. It is. It is very important, and it's a way essentially of moving in through to country after country, going from the Caucasus into Central Asia, into the Far East, so that the NATO spreads its tentacles
Because it's a
throughout the
defensive
world.
alliance. Because it's a
Yeah,
defensive alliance.
exactly.
Okay.
Because it's defensive. It's
I
all
mean, so
defense.
the United States doesn't have to have a base, an American base per se, in Moldova. It has a NATO base, or
That's
NATO
right.
representative, a
That's right.
NATO flag.
That's right.
No,
That's
that's
that's right.
exactly what it
That's
is.
right.
I mean, NATO is, George and I have said this repeatedly years and years now. It's just a marketing thing. It's a
Yes.
marketing ploy.
Right, right. The reality is it becomes this giant military political bloc. I mean, it says, hey, that is a giant military political bloc, and you know, other countries like Russia and China become very, very nervous about NATO on its borders. I mean, if it wasn't menacing, they wouldn't be worried about it. Yeah, it's
Well,
a this isn't a supper club. This is a military
Well,
alliance.
ask the people of the former Yugoslavia.
Exactly.
It
Exactly.
isn't
Yeah.
a joke. It isn't a
Right.
supper club, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Um, Speaking of supper clubs, the our friend Chancellor Schmerz of Germany, um, who was a very belligerent German chancellor, and and this is something that the Russians have pointed out. We get a little worried when we get a belligerent chancellor of Germany. Schmerz has now unambiguously declared that all of the drone incursions into Europe are coming from Russia. And he said this. The Let me just make sure I've got this. Um, and yeah, he said this the other day. So let's just take a look what his declarations. Um, Here we are. Germany, Merz. We assume Russia is behind drone incursions.
Here we go. Here, so we assume we
We
don't
assume
know. We
that
have
that's
there we evidence supports. No, that's not
mhm,
the sentence.
that's
Assume.
right. Assume.
Well,
Assume.
there's an old joke here. Look at the word assume. We'll go back,
I
George.
know, and that's
Okay,
exactly
well, then you repeat it. Okay.
right. Don't assume anything, because that will make an ass of you and me.
Exactly.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said he assumed Russia was behind many of the drones sighted over Germany this weekend, potentially including those that disrupted dozens of flights and stranded more than 10,000 passengers at Munich airport. He added that the frequency of the incursions in Europe's airspace was unprecedented even compared with Cold War times, but none of the drones spotted so far had been armed. All had been on reconnaissance flights. The problem I always wonder is that, these drones appear out of nowhere and then disappear somewhere. How do you know that they're Russian? Unless you actually shot one of them down and then looked at the remains, I just don't know how you can know that the drones are of Russian origin.
Well, I mean, if you know they're on reconnaissance flights and you know they're not armed, so ergo, you should be able to understand where they came from.
Yes,
One would assume.
one would assume. Our assumption is that Russia is behind most of the drone flights. Oh, it's just most. Okay. And then this is Deutsche Welle. It says the same thing. And then, but now Bavarian Prime Minister Söder gets in on the act. So Merz, blah, blah, but this is we suspect Russia is behind the drone flight. But then he says, I can reassure the public. So far, we haven't had a single incident or accident involving armed drones. There have only been attempts at espionage. And also to attempts to alarm the public. Well, if they're attempts to alarm the public, then why are you alarming the public? I mean, you say, oh, the Russians want to alarm the public, and therefore I'm playing along with it by alarming the public. And then we have Bavarian Prime Minister Markus Söder also stated that Russia could be behind the drones spotted over Munich airport. However, he admitted he could not confirm this was certain. This is also a form of hybrid warfare to make us nervous, to frighten us. They always bring out the NATO cliche, the latest cliche of the hour, hybrid warfare. Therefore, we must not show weakness. We must not be afraid. We must act sensibly, calmly, but also consistently. And here's the New York Times, which declares, look, in the headline, as
Oh.
Russian drones menace Europe, as if it's already been determined that these are Russian drones. Putin says Moscow has no plans to invade. And the President Putin lashed out at European elites for whipping up hysteria about the Russian threat. And then it says, then it goes on here, the Putin, but the had no plans to invade NATO. After the airspace violations, some European leaders have said that the continent has entered its most perilous moment in decades. NATO nations are moving to beef up aerial defenses that they believe Russia has been probing for weaknesses. And then there's Putin, and then but he's saying, oh, this is impossible, something impossible to believe. Mr. Putin added, I'd like to tell them, calm down, sleep tight, and finally deal with your own issues. Later, he insisted that Moscow had no aggressive intentions regarding other countries. And then the Times puts in, more than 3 years ago, as Russia massed troops near the border with Ukraine, Mr. Putin denied he was planning an invasion. On Thursday, he painted NATO countries as the aggressors, suggesting that their support for Kiev in the war that followed meant that the Western alliance was at
Well,
war with Russia.
that's really how what's the it's trying to distill what happened in the early months of 2022 down to very simple ideas, which it was
Right.
far more complex. Is that the Russians had made it very clear that there would be, what was the term, George? It was a political,
Military technical operation.
reaction. And on December 15th, 2021, the Russians made it clear to avoid a potential conflict, they had their terms. It was sent to
Correct.
NATO and it was sent to the United States. I mean, that's always, it's never mentioned. It's never mentioned that the Russians are
Right.
saying, look, this is the last chance.
Right.
Okay. So, we're not going to invade. Well, the Russians are saying, hey, look, we gave you our terms. Are you going to react? No, we're not going to react. Okay. Now, you
Well,
can agree or you can disagree with that. That's fine. Okay. That can be a debate point, but it's a fact.
well, it is. No, I agree with that, and I think that it's also interesting that you know the New York Times writes in this way, and of course all media write this way, as if the Europeans are these innocent bystanders. You know, hey, Russia's planning some aggression against us. So what are we going to do? They're threatening us. And then they never really mention the very active role that these European states have played in the war in Ukraine. So in every way, you know, as far as Russia is concerned, they can definitely look upon the Europeans as parties to the conflict, as being at war with Russia. Nonetheless, instead of saying that, Russia has insisted that we have no intention of uh, essentially extending this war beyond Ukraine's borders. They've said this, even though they would have every justification to say, "Hey, you're engaged in a war against us, and we need to put an end to this because this can't go on." But in fact, Russia has not done this. And beforehand, this is the point. Beforehand, when we think about Putin's diplomacy, um, just look at that dog.
Sorry.
If we think about this, what Putin was saying, the speeches he was making, and this was, we go back to November of 2021, even before that, when I think it was when he went to the foreign ministry and he gave that speech, he said this expansion of NATO, this has really become a serious problem for us. We're going to have to address this in no uncertain terms in the near future. They haven't said anything like that when it comes to the Europeans. So therefore, for the Times to suggest, well, yeah, that's what he said then, and now he's saying that, that doesn't mean anything. That means Russia could unleash an attack.
Yeah, but it's denying that the Russians were attempting to negotiate. They were making this is what's so frustrating, George, is that what do the Russians want? What is Putin thinking? Well, why don't you just read the
Right.
Kremlin website? Okay, read TASS.com. Okay, it's not the most exciting website you'll ever come across. It's pretty dry, but it tells you what's going on. Okay, in pretty
Right.
clear terms. Okay, this whole thing with the drones. What's the thing with the drones? It's obvious what this thing is about. Is that Ukraine needs security guarantees. What does that mean to a grocer in Munich?
All right.
Oh, okay. Well, what do you want me to do about it? Okay. Ukraine is an integral part of European defense. What does that mean? It wasn't
Right.
part of European defense before February 2022, but why is it important now? The grocer in Munich is asking these questions. But drones. Now you see the drone up there? They're looking at you. Okay, that's the fear monger. They want to make it. They want to have a meaningful, lived potential experience where they can understand it. Oh, those are Russian drones. Oh, that's what this is all about. Because their arguments about security for Europe and the importance of NATO. No, the average person doesn't give a hoot about what NATO. What is their? I don't know what their
Right.
mission is. It's American thing, right? That's what the grocer in Munich will say to you.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Yeah.
drones. Oh, they're looking in your windows of your house. Okay, these sneaky Russians. They're trying to make it bring it closer to you. Bring
Yeah.
it
Absolutely.
where they are.
I couldn't agree more because I think that has been their problem with trying to get into this war in Ukraine. In that the European public says, "Well, what's it got to do with us? Why is this such an important matter for us?" And so they tried one thing and another: values, democracy. Russia's terrible. They're horrible people. Nothing has worked. The only thing that has any chance of working is the suggestion that Russia has aggressive designs on Europe. At any minute now they're going to unleash an attack. And Merz says this. Oh, Russia could attack Germany. Oh, that's a real possibility. Russia could attack Germany. So this is what they're doing. They're trying to whip up this public fervor. Oh my God, we're under attack. Putin is going to unleash his
Okay,
hordes against us.
everyone, even though I think Trump rightly has said, look, I mean, if if Russia is such a threat, why don't you spend more money on your own defense? But I would add to that, even though these European countries won't cough up the correct percentage that various administrations have demanded, and including the Trump administration of what, 5%. Well, that's still a lot of money. That's an
Yes.
enormous amount of money. And you can't see what's in your own skies? What are you spending the money on? Where does the money go? It goes to your headquarters? It
Well,
goes
that's
to
good.
fancy banquets? Okay, is that
Right.
where all the money goes? I mean, if you can't control you if not control if you can't even understand what's going on in your airspace, then what are you spending your money on?
Right. Right.
And
Um,
all this airport stuff that's what is it when you like blackmail someone? It's ransomware or something. What's there's a certain term.
yeah. I think it's called ransomware. Ransomware. That isn't that the attack to, yeah. That somehow
Okay,
you attack with your
right. Okay,
whatever. Yes,
look,
a cyber attack, and then hey, pay up some money, and we'll rid you of this problem.
okay. Also, drones. I already. I'm not going to do it again. George and I was on Friday, I think it was. We were talking about this drone thing. Just about anybody that has a bank account or a credit card can buy a drone. Okay,
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
and it's not armed. Okay, it's
Right.
just I
Right.
see them sometime, and I'm
Right.
like, oh. Recently I saw one in the distance. I thought that must be a big drone because it's pretty big at that distance. Okay,
Right.
almost anyone can buy them. I can buy them online during this conversation right now.
Right.
Okay,
Right. Right.
well,
Yes.
if you want to put the entire continent on the edge of war, you got to be a little bit more specific. I'm sorry.
Right. Right. Well, that's the best they've got. They don't have anything else. I mean, that's
Yeah,
their
because I
problem.
think it's all BS, George.
Yeah. I agree. Um, Speaking of BS, we talked yesterday.
It's like the BS report.
The BS, yes, the BS report. Yes, we were talking yesterday about Georgia because we had Georgia on our mind, and the municipal elections. It's just a municipal election. It wasn't even a national election, a municipal election, and there were protests, an attempt to storm the presidential palace. And today, Kaya Kallas, who never misses an opportunity to get into the media, Kaya Kallas has issued a statement. Um, and the statement, surprisingly enough, doesn't condemn those who use violence to overturn an election result that they didn't like. No, the statement was a statement of condemnation for, yes, the Georgian authorities. So here's the statement that Kaya Kallas issued um, about Georgia. Statement by the High Representative. Great! And then this was a joint statement because this horrible woman, this Kosh, the enlargement commissioner. So it's a statement by two uh, big shots in the EU. And it says here, this Saturday in Georgia was the day of local election, amid a period of extensive crackdown on dissent. Months of raids on independent media, the passing of laws targeting civil society, the jailing of opponents and activists, or amendments to the electoral code favoring the ruling party drastically reduced the possibility of having competitive election.
I think there's a reason for calling out plagiarism here, but keep going, Joe. We read this yesterday. Okay.
Yes, but now it comes under the name of the foreign minister, no less, of the EU and the enlargement commissioner. And then a large part of the opposition boycotted these elections, and the turnout was relatively
All
low.
right. So again, everybody, please. It just splits my head with a headache. So if you boycott the election, so why do you comment on the election that you did not participate in? Can you explain that to me?
No, I cannot. But of course, it's so entertaining because a week ago we had the same Kaya Kalas celebrating the victory of Maya Sandu. The turnout, incidentally,
Which
was
was completely stolen.
completely stolen, and the turnout was lower. And that was a parliamentary election, not a local election. I mean, local election everywhere. You hardly get anyone showing up for local
Well,
elections.
in Georgia it was 30%, which is pretty good.
Pretty good. Um, but that's it. But she said, "Oh, the turnout was low." Yeah, well, the turnout would be low. I mean, then don't boycott the election. So they boycotted the election, um, and then bring well, the crackdown on the opposition. Didn't we have all that in Moldova? But that's of course all because of Russia. And anyway, this goes on, and keep in mind this statement all because of a local election. Um, and then she says, in addition, the refusal of the Georgian authorities to invite international monitors in due time, in particular the OSCE and that the Office of Democratic Institutions, Human Rights, undermined the transparency of the electoral process and prevented credible international monitoring. Domestic organizations also refrained from observing due to the repressive environment. Large
Well,
numbers of
everybody, repressive environment. It's a bit misleading here because
Mhm.
what the Georgian authorities over the last couple of years have demanded and now are enforcing is transparency. So if you don't want to be transparent, you're not
Mhm.
welcome.
That's
Okay.
right. That's right. Um, Now, I have to say, I didn't realize that the OSCE makes it a regular habit to monitor mayoral elections. I mean, is that? I mean, I mean, are they? Is that you're going to go everywhere and
An
every
organization in
single
search,
election everywhere?
yeah, an organization in search of a mission. There you
That's
go.
right. Um, and then we urge calm and restraint in the post-election period, and call on the authorities to uphold citizens' rights to freedom of assembly and expression. And then a constructive and inclusive dialogue involving all political actors and civil society is essential. And we call on every side to refrain from violence.
Well, I mean, Georgia. Maybe I missed something, but Georgia isn't part of the European Union, so why is she
No, it's
talking?
not. No, it's not. That's why she had to haul in that enlargement commissioner, even though Georgia's not, anywhere close to even beginning to negotiate induction into the EU. Um, but and then and finally, here's a good one. Finally, the European Union finally rejects and condemns the disinformation regarding the EU's role in Georgia and denounces the personal attacks against the ambassador of the European
Well,
Union
did
in
she
Georgia.
condemn the interference of the EU in Moldova?
No,
That was a EU election, everybody. That fingerprints were all over it. Okay,
yes,
and they
yes,
and they
that's
they they won just by a whisker.
right. That's right. Um, but this is what's really interesting about it because she steps in. She doesn't mention at all by the violence of the protesters. She doesn't mention that essentially they were refusing to accept an election result. Her, saying, "Oh well, she's clearly attacking the violence on the part of the authorities." Well, what usually happens when you try to storm a presidential palace? I mean, it's yeah, the police step in, but it's just fascinating that she felt the compunction to issue this statement, of outrage. And we won't have mean things said about the EU. We will not tolerate this. in the name of free speech and values. We would not have this nasty things said about
Well,
me.
we all can be rest assured that she's not done yet, and the EU is not done yet. They're going to continue to bring Georgia to a boiling point. Okay, and they want violence. See, this is it. They want violence because they want the authorities to react, and it justifies their claim that they're authoritarians in the country they don't like. I mean,
Right.
it's a simple gambit over and over again. They want more violence.
That, of course they do. Of course, that's the whole point. It's always to provoke violence. They used to do that in Russia when they had these demonstrations. So that was in the Navalny era. They would hold demonstrations, but they wouldn't ask for permits. And of course, if you hold a demonstration anywhere and you don't have a permit for it, then police will come along and break it up. And so, of course, when the police came and broke up these demonstrations for which there was no permit, boom, all the TV cameras were there to film it and say, "Oh my God,
I was there, and
Putin's police state is repressing its opposition."
well, I was there, and I had a cameraman, and the police weren't very nice to me. We were on the main drag; it was called Tverskaya Street, and I said to the police, "I'm just doing my job," and he said, "I'm just doing my job."
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
He said,
yeah.
"You
Well,
don't have a you don't have a permit to be here," and
yeah,
and this was I think Michael McFaul was around at that time as ambassador. They gave a place
yeah,
for the protesters to be there, and
yeah.
it was it was a very strange because you had trade unionists and brown shirts and Stalinists and you had monarchists. You had every single. It was 31 flavors of weirdness. Okay, but they could protest. No, because they were cordoned off and they were given protection by the police. They said, "No, we don't want to do it. No, no, no,"
Right,
and then
right.
it fizzled out.
That's right. Now, what happened in Georgia was obviously, I mean, it was an attempt to create a crisis, a color revolution. It didn't work, and so, and this is, and I think this is the prime minister said, I think overnight that this is something like the fourth attempt at a color revolution in Georgia. You keep doing this, and it is striking, particularly yesterday was the 25th anniversary of the first of the color revolution, which was the overthrow of Slobodan Milosevic, and that inaugurated all the color revolutions. But they're not working anymore. I mean, it's like because I think people have wised up of how these things are pulled. But they did work for a while. I mean, we had the Rose Revolution, we had the Tulip Revolution in Kyrgyzstan. We had the Cedar Revolution in Lebanon, and of course, we had the Orange Revolution first in 2004, and then of course we had Maidan in 2014. But since then, and I think because of all the terrible things that happened after Maidan, I think countries have wised up. I mean, these protests that have been going on in Serbia for about a year. I'm not coming to any satisfactory conclusion to the protesters. I mean, they keep doing it, but they're
Well,
nowhere to overthrowing Vucic.
and one of the reasons why these manufactured colored revolutions are having so many problems is that number one, transparency laws have come into effect. So you got to say where you're getting your
Right,
money from. Okay,
right,
and there's a close eye. When I first moved here, you would see things in Moscow brought to you by USAID.
right,
It was ubiquitous, okay? And now, and George and I have said it many times. I would go down to elections in Georgia. This is when Saakashvili was around, and you couldn't find a seat in a cafe because the whole place, every restaurant, every cafe is full with NGO people, and they're foreign moneyed.
yep, yep,
And the
yep,
Georgians say, no, you need to be transparent. You
yep,
need to be, and also they prepared because the a weak regime resorts to violence. No, it's illegitimate people going against the constitutional order to
Right.
effect political change, they use the violence.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
They
No,
and
that's
we've
right.
seen this repeatedly, okay,
Right.
particularly in Georgia. Yeah, you're carrying a European Union flag. Well, why don't you carry your flag, Georgia?
That's right.
Okay,
That's right.
and then
Yes.
there are multiple examples of people in these riots. What they are, they're not even Georgian,
That's right. Yeah.
and
Exactly.
they're certainly not Russian. To repeat, and this is one of our mantras: in Romania, in Moldova, and in Georgia, there are no pro-Russia parties. In the Czech Republic, there's no pro-Russia parties. But
Right.
read Politico. Oh, pro-Russia party. They're not. They're skeptical of Brussels. That's what
Yes.
they're worried about. It's
That's
not.
right.
And then, of course, the elite project called the Ukraine Project. It's not
Hmm.
organic. It's not organic
Yes.
anywhere in Europe. Anywhere. And
That's right.
these
That's
people are
right.
shoving it down everyone's throats, and they're not interested in
Right.
it.
Right. No, I think so, and I think, but what as always happens, the first time they did it, I think the authorities, really, the Milosevic's authorities, were just simply asleep at the switch. They should have cracked down on it much earlier. They didn't. That's the problem. They keep saying somebody's authoritarian. He's the last thing he was. He was an authoritarian. I mean, he was just like, if he had been authoritarian, he would not have allowed
No,
what happened
exactly,
in
exactly.
Yugoslavia.
And
I mean,
in the case of 2014, again, Yanukovych was not the smartest guy. Your first mistake is, okay, I'll negotiate. You're done. You're done.
yeah, yeah,
Once you say,
exactly.
okay, I'll negotiate. Let's have political reform. When you agree to that, you're
Yeah,
done, because then that's where they take it and they
yeah,
keep making every single, they corner you and then say you're the authoritarian. And he said, no, but I agreed. Too late. The snipers are already on Maidan and they're killing people.
absolutely. Yeah,
It's too late.
absolutely. No, absolutely right. And once he agreed, signing that deal on February the 21st, 2014, promising, oh, we'll have elections in December. Of course, they were not going to wait till December. No, 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 no. We're not waiting around to December. We've got him on the ropes. He's pretty much announced that
He
he's,
already surrendered. He
yeah, he's
surrendered.
already
When he signed
surrendered.
that, he
No,
surrendered.
we're not even going to wait 24 hours. I mean, that was it. He had already done that. And this is what you notice the language that she's been using, this Kaya Kalas, was saying, all this dialogue. Well, why do we need dialogue? We've had an election. Now, you govern in the country until the next election. But there has to be dialogue. But that's what they mean by dialogue. You essentially surrender and announce that you're going to be having an election very soon, which we will steal. And that's what they've been doing incidentally with Vucic. Also, we need dialogue. You're going to have a dialogue with the opposition. But the whole point, even what we see in Serbia, is that the opposition never really puts forward anything specific other than we want Vucic out. Well,
It's just, but see, it's all part of the same paradigm. NATO. What does dialogue with Russia mean? It means when Russia surrenders. That's the
yeah,
dialogue.
yeah,
And so when it comes to these elections, dialogue is you give up,
yeah. That's it.
you
That's
surrender. That's the
that's
dialogue for them.
That's what exactly dialogue. Yes, we want to have a conversation. Anyway, let's go to our locals page where our community um, comes to and they want to make sure that the dogs are fed and the dogs are kept happy because they're always very wary that the dogs are disgruntled by the state of the tip jar. So we're very grateful to our locals community. And Cynthia, always very good to see you. Thank you, as always, for your generosity. So Cynthia says, War Secretary Hegseth lambasted fat generals, yes, but he can't be all serious about this until he actually fires them for being fat. And if he really is serious, he ought to start at the very top by lambasting Fatso Taco Trump. Yes, being fat is indeed a bad look, as he said. But to me, it only looks bad in street parades and photo shoots. And I'm sure he became obsessed with this, and out of jealousy, no less, after seeing the Chinese soldiers looking
Yeah.
lean and mean, marching in
Even
perfect.
their women. Even their women. Wow. Well, I mean, I would have to slightly disagree. Trump isn't a soldier, okay?
Yeah. Mhm.
So that's
And
something.
he never, yeah, he never has been. And we have civilian leadership, so civilian those kinds of the military discipline that is applies to the military. He's not a
Yeah, but
he's
I
not
mean,
a
if Headset wants to be serious, then every single employee of the Defense Department, as they go into work, should go through a breathalyzer. Okay, and Pete Hegseth would fail. Okay, Midnight Hammer himself. Okay,
right, right.
so
That's right. That's right. He no, I mean, I think he is physically very fit. I mean, you can
yeah,
even
yeah,
see by his appearance.
he likes those push-ups. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he does those, and he does have a very good athletic look. Nonetheless, it's always a little strange when you've got somebody who really didn't rise to any particularly senior rank in the military. He'd been in the National Guard. Now, he did see military service, so he's not like Tim Walz of Minnesota, who never did see military service. So he did actually see.
Tampon,
Uh,
tampon Tim. Yeah,
yeah, that's right, even in combat. But Tim Walz, of course, had the stolen valor problem because he did suggest that he had been in combat. Um, but nonetheless, it is a little odd to bring in all this top brass and start lecturing them about that they're overweight. I mean, it's a little bit presumptuous. But I guess he wanted to do it,
I don't
put them.
know. I mean, I don't travel in MAGA circles, so I don't know what the reaction of Trump's base was to all of that. I mean, I have posited that he just wanted to prance on the stage like George C. Scott did as Patton, or something like that. Okay, because he had the big flag back there, and he was.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it definitely was
It
from the
sounded
movie.
like
I mean,
that
yeah.
was a speech you really needed for incoming platoon leaving boot camp. That's what it
Right,
sounds.
but that was it. And when the Patton would make these speeches to soldiers who had gone through training and were about to be sent into combat. So that was his kind of morale boosting speech. Hey, and I mean, he never delivered that speech that George C. Scott delivered. I mean, there were bits and pieces from his various speeches over the years.
It was mythologized. Yes. Yeah.
That's right. But one has to say at the same time, Patton was obviously he was a very good general. He was not a general who was particularly liked by his men. His men did not like him. I mean, there are generals who are
Bradley.
good.
They loved Bradley.
Yeah, that's
Bradley.
right. But Patton was not liked, and when he, like in the film, and that did happen in real life when he had to issue that formal apology in front of the huge army. I mean Eisenhower and Marshall really put him through his paces. He had to do this humiliating apology about when he was slapping that soldier. The soldiers who were listening, they had no sympathy for Patton. They just did not like him because he didn't have the reputation of caring about his men. He didn't have the reputation. He's somebody who will protect us. He'll try to minimize casualties. He wasn't somebody who minimized casualties, so he wasn't much liked. But nonetheless, I mean, it was a good film, and I can see why people might be inspired by the film.
It was a
Uh,
good film that George C. Scott did not like.
he didn't, yeah, he didn't like. Well, yeah, that's right. Why didn't he like it? I don't remember now.
He just didn't feel that it was it it, it, he felt that he didn't show he did what he demonstrated there was not the talent that he believed that he had. Which with
Right.
Doctor Strangelove, it's very different because when that scene when he's saying, when you see those planes, they're flying 500 feet off the ground. Remember that part? That's
Yes.
amazing. He did that
Right.
like 30 times. 30 times.
Yes.
There are 30 takes for that. And
Right.
Kubrick kept saying, "No, give me a little bit more energy, a little bit more rage," and it got more and more of a caricature. And the most extreme take, that's what Stanley wanted. And George C. Scott never forgave him for that because he said,
Right.
"You make
Right.
me look like a clown," which, of course,
Right.
he didn't understand what the film was about. It was a
Right.
satire.
No,
But I mean
that's
he did that take over and over. From what I understand, that was the take that was the most takes ever of any part of that film was George C. Scott doing
right.
that. Okay,
Right. Right.
which I think was brilliant. First,
Was brilliant,
Kubrick
but
knew what he wanted.
that was, I think, the scene where I think the president asked him, "Can he get through? Can this
Can he get
bomber get
through? Yeah.
through?" And he said, "Yeah, they're fantastic. You see these pilots, they're so brilliant and so on and blah, blah, blah. Can he get through?" And you bet your, and he suddenly realized, by saying that, you bet your life they can get through, that's it. I mean, that's a disastrous. And it kind of in mid sentence, he realizes what he has just said, that he will actually can get through, and therefore, the doomsday machine goes into effect. But yeah, that was, of course, brilliant. And of course, in the funniest part of that film, Doctor Strangelove, is when he's talking and then he trips over. He's walking backwards. He trips over, and then he gets up and he doesn't even stop. He doesn't stop talking. It's just he's walking backward, trips over, and then gets up, and he hasn't even paused for breath. Um, so
But that was intentional. If you miss a line, if you make the wrong, just do the entire scene. It doesn't matter.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, right, yeah,
It's
um,
yeah.
yes,
Okay. I see here Babish from the Czech Republic.
yes, that's
George
right.
and I
So
did a video on that yesterday.
yes,
I can't read it very well yet, but as a skeptic, yeah, we give a lot of caveats about this guy. See you
that's right.
yesterday.
That's right. Cynthia says, from what I can make of it, Babish is a skeptic of the war in Ukraine, but also supported the protests in Belarus. He certainly can't be called a Putin sympathizer. Nope. To me, he's more a Maloney type, and I think we came to that conclusion yesterday. He says that the massive export of shells to Ukraine from the Czech Republic should be placed under NATO governance rather than be stopped. Yeah, I think
Okay,
that's some of.
just tell us you watched the video yesterday. Okay.
Right. I think that's right. I mean, that was it. And I think, as we concluded yesterday, he's a very wily customer. He's seen which way the wind is blowing, and he's played along. Oh, he's a populist. He's doing Czechia first. With Trump. Trump. But yeah, I mean, there's a record. His record speaks for itself. So don't expect any real you know attacks on NATO policy. He's not going to do it. That's not who he is. But he won an election, and that's he knew what he needed to do to win. So yeah, that's that. And then Cynthia goes on, but Hexeth is overlooking the obvious fact that war is moving away from the physical battlefield to the virtual world of drones. So any drone operator can be grossly fat and entirely fail any physical fitness test, and will take out any lean and mean soldier who appears on the video screen. Because of this, he should stop looking back in the past and start looking forward to the future. And if he wants the U.S. to be victorious in war, I don't think I would entirely agree with that, because I think there is a requirement on the military to maintain, a level of discipline, maintain a level of physical fitness. Whether you're in combat or you're not in combat, actually engaging in physical combat, there is an expectation that you will achieve certain standards, and I think
It's part
you
of
have you
discipline.
have to you have to maintain those standards. I mean, you don't have to be somebody super athletic, but I think you have to maintain a certain level of physical fitness and a certain level of just the minimum I think you would expect to be able to march properly. I mean, I think that is part of a military. You have to be able to
Well, I
march, and
think
you have to
even you and
know,
I,
know how to march in unison.
I think we could achieve that with a little bit of practice. Okay.
I think so. I mean, in school, I was a member of the school cadet force. We still had that. I don't know if they still have it, but I was part of the school cadet force, and even the school cadet force managed to march in unison. And everyone complains, "Oh, God, this is so boring, and I don't want to do the marching." But I think it is part of learning how to act as a unit. I mean, I think that all military, essentially, hey, you're not an individual, you are a member of a unit, and therefore the marching expresses that unity that you're supposed to maintain. um, all right, so and then last but not least, today there should be negotiations taking place in Egypt,
Egypt,
uh,
yeah.
at least the first step of the implementation of the Trump plan, which is what are the mechanics, at least of the release of the hostages and the release of the prisoners. Um, I think, I mean, the part that I think we can agree on is that first part of this peace plan will be implemented. I think there will be a release of the hostages and a release, I think, of most of the Palestinian prisoners that Hamas is seeking. What happens then? I think that's much more debatable. But I think this part, I think, will be done.
I agree with George on that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Once the captives are released, then the Israelis will go back doing what they do. So,
right. Well, that's your view. I'm not sure. This is a thing where we disagree. I'm
well,
not
yeah,
sure.
this is one of those arguments that I think that neither one of us can really marshal any.
Well, we don't know. I mean, we don't know what's going to
We
happen.
just don't know. We just don't know. Okay.
Right. No,
Um,
that's
but I do think that that's going to be part of it. I think that it obviously will give more awareness to the plight of the Palestinians, but awareness doesn't always turn into action, unfortunately. So
right.
I think that,
Right.
and I think that's what Trump has taken heat. And I predicted this. I mean, he doesn't care. He doesn't get. He's taking heat for it, and the having forced through the release of the captives will garner him some political capital. How long he'll be able to politic off that capital, I have no idea. But he
Well,
doesn't
but
want that to
that's
happen.
right, and I think that
And,
it's
and just real quick, that's how this conflict is being framed by the mainstream media. The story is about the captives. It's not about the genocidal war against the Palestinians, and that's why Trump is
right,
looking.
right. But the reason why I'm more doubtful, I'm not saying you're wrong. I mean, you may be right. But why I'm think that this time there may be some progress toward um, a settlement is that this is his plan. It's a very detailed plan. It's the Trump 20-point plan.
Yeah, it's
If it falls
20
through,
points of vagueness, except for one. The captives will be released. The
but
rest
it's
of it,
not
George,
exactly vague. It's
the
still
rest
in.
of it is no,
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 but
no.
it isn't vague. I mean, it
Nothing
says, for
talking
instance,
about it at
there's to be
all.
there is to be
Nothing.
no annexation of Gaza. There's to be, essentially no one will be forced to leave against their will, and I mean that is something that is, Israel has never agree to anything along those lines. I mean, even that point, anybody who leaves will be able to return. That's part of the plan. Israel has never
Well,
agreed to
George,
anything like
I
that.
mean, how can you even talk about something like that? There's no mention about ending the isolation and the blockade of Gaza.
Well,
There's no mention of
well,
that.
but,
There
well,
is. international aid. They're not going to let the UN do it. I mean, that's why I say every single point, except for one, is very vague and it's open to
But
interpretation.
there is a difference. There is a difference. First of all, according to this plan, um, it will be overseen by a peace board. That's presented. That's a peace board. The chairman of the board
A
will be
board
Trump.
that doesn't even exist
It
right
doesn't
now.
exist now, but the point is that Trump has now committed himself. Now Trump has already shown that if he's committed to something, he can get it done. I mean, there's no question. He has, when he wanted something, he was ready to humiliate Netanyahu. I mean, that thing, what he did over Qatar, was a real humiliation for Netanyahu. I mean, that was no ands, ifs, and buts. He wasn't going to let Bibi walk with that.
It changed nothing materially
It
on the
does. It does
It's
change.
one of
You
the
remember?
interesting things. I don't know, because George, we don't need to disagree yet because there's no predicate for our
Right.
disagreement yet.
Right.
Okay, but I think that you'll agree with me on this: is that the next week is going to be quite critical, one way or
Yeah.
another. Because
Right.
I'm not as optimistic. I think that there'll be a mechanism for the release of the captives. I don't know if Israel will keep its word on release of prisoners. I mean, there's way over 10,000 of them. Okay, and they're not talking about those numbers. We'll see where that goes. Okay, and Netanyahu he has to deal with the captive issue as well. So after that, I'll put a marker down. I think it's closer to a ruse than anything else. George can disagree with me. I think he's
Right.
got a good case to be made. But my case or your case, one way or another, I think will come in. We'll
I think
see the
I think
conflict
see.
by the end of this week.
Right. I think we'll see. Yeah, we'll see quite shortly. I mean, I think that.
Uh, Hamas must disarm. Well, it still has a handgun. They haven't disarmed.
Right.
You know
No,
what?
that's I think that's clearly going to be Israel's line. I mean, we know what Israel's going to do. I mean, the fact is, in a way, we're not in disagreement about what Israel intends to do. I mean, I think we're in agreement. Absolutely, Israel has no interest in this and will want to undermine this deal any way it can. I mean, that there's no question that we'll do that. I think the only real disagreement between us is, will Trump allow Israel to do it? And I think
Good. Good. I agree. I agree. That's a good way
and
of putting
therefore
it. That's
there's
a good way.
there's and I'm just citing that there's evidence that where Trump, I think, is commits himself to something, then Trump actually is willing to apply pressure
Yeah, but
against Israel.
he's trying to get the captives out. He's not trying to end the genocidal war. See, there's a lot of nuance here.
Well,
Everyone before the end, because and maybe a lot of people are going to disagree with me. I'm prepared for it. But Greta Thunberg, I think she did the right thing. I respect her. Her whole climate thing, I never was on board with that. George and I never went,
yeah.
whatever. But it took a lot of courage to do that, and I find it commendable, and I respect her
I agree. I absolutely agree with you, because it's courage, because she
courage.
knew she would be she would fall into captivity. The Israelis would grab her and arrest her. Once you're in captivity, and particularly, you're a kind of a frail young woman, um, you have no idea what they're going to do to you. I mean, you're
Well,
dealing with
apparently they did stuff.
right, right, right. So it was indeed very brave of her. I mean, yeah, from the reports, they did do stuff. Maybe they did even worse. I mean, who knows? I mean, I think as things stand, I know that she's being expelled, but I don't know whether she's left Israel yet. But yeah, I mean, that was absolutely extremely brave. And I mean, I think everyone who took part in that flotilla are brave, given what Israel has done in the past. I mean, I mean, I mean, they are always willing to shoot and kill. I mean, that's when you're dealing with Israelis, they will do that. And then when there's outrage, the usual characters, Israel says, "Well, we promise we'll have an inquiry into what happened," and then they have the inquiry. No one did anything wrong. Everyone behaved exactly in accordance with how they're supposed to behave. So, then you're dead. I mean, that's basically it. So, everyone, I think, who took part in that flotilla, I think, was, you just have to commend this extraordinary bravery.
It's going to be a very interesting week as it unfolds, okay?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
we've seen Donald Trump. I tend to agree with George. When he puts capital behind something, he can exert, even if it's on the margins. Because I don't think this is the Greater Israel Project is going to be thwarted in any way around this, but one very specific issue. But Trump likes to win, okay, and
exactly.
he wants to win.
He wants
Okay,
to win, and he's put his name to this. I mean, it's now there. It is. He put it. It's his 20-point plan. So if Bibi just sort of renders it null and void, then he kind of is really made to look a fool. And I don't think.
that's why I think this week is going to be
Yeah.
very interesting because
Right.
he could easily be made a fool of.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's why it's worth from the broad confines of this story here. It's important to watch. Okay,
That's right. That's
you
right.
put him
All
up
right,
there.
then. Yeah. Yep. Then we will be watching it, and we will be back same time next Monday, and then tomorrow will be solo 3 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, everyone who joined us. Thank you for all of your questions and comments. And thank you, Peter. And we'll be back. All the best. See you.